Thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight, middle of the summer. Sometimes we don't have quite as many people, but we still have a good turnout here tonight. We've also got a real good group of, it looks like about 10, 12, maybe something like that online. So thank you for those that are also able to join us via Zoom. Tonight, again, we have our competition night. Thank you for those that have submitted images. I think we have a total of 64, I believe. So about the right number to allow for critiques of up to, maybe 30, 40 seconds or whatever, and that as each image pops up. Also want to send out a special thank you to Cheryl Opperman, who will be judging and providing critiques for tonight's images. Cheryl, she had an amazing presentation to our club back in January. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but evidently it was. But she had really good comments on wildlife photography. And that's right. And so anyways, we're really excited to have her back here tonight to judge tonight's event. Do you want to bring up a couple of other things that we have coming up here? We have August 21st, we have a presentation night, and that is light painting with the Russell Klimas. September 4th, we have exhibition night. For those that haven't participated in those, again, what we do is you can submit up to 4 images. It can be color, black and white, it doesn't matter. And then what we do is then we go through and we get to talk a little bit about your image, what you were thinking about, why you took the image, and then any special comments that you want to make about your special post-processing or anything about it. And then we open it up to comments from the group. Again, it's not a judged event. We're not giving scores, but it's a good way to just learn from each other as far as some of the images that we take. And so that'll be on September 4th. Another thing that's coming up is night sky workshops, and that is September 6th, 7th, and 8th, and that's going to be out in Eastern Colorado. Lone Tree member Darren White, who does a lot of night sky workshops with others, is offering a really a very discounted rate to Lone Tree Photo Club members for this one. It's going to be limited to Lone Tree Photo Club members to attend. Again, 6th, 7th, and 8th. You don't have to go all 3 nights. You can go 1 night for $99, 2 nights for $150, or all 3 nights for $229. And you can pick and choose of which of those dates that you want to attend. And again, it's a real good value at those prices compared to what Darren and others typically choose or charge for their night photography workshops.
Michael, where would we find that information?
Oh, yeah, great question. I was going to get there, but I'm glad you asked. So where you find that information is it's actually on Darren's website. I think we have a link to that in our Lone Tree Photo Club website.
Yeah. Let's go chase light.
Yeah, let's chase light. Let's chase light. And if you go out to that website, he's got a listing of his workshops, and on there specifically for this one in September, it mentions that it's a private event for Lone Tree Photo Club members. And then if you go in there, what Darren was saying is go in and there's a link, and you can send an email to him from the link there of which night you're interested in, and he'll provide you with additional information.
September is going to be Trish Santangelo, color theory.
Okay.
She's the ACC professor for photography, and
Oh, great. Okay.
should be a good.
Okay. Color theory, color management. That will be again. That's on Wednesday, September 18th.
And then I think Russell Klimas is going to be our judge for the macro and light painting.
Oh, he is. Okay, great. Yep, I'll get to that. And that's the next thing I was going to bring up also, and that is for for our competitions. Again, tonight is open. Sometimes we have the themed competitions. The next themed competition is October 2nd, and that's light painting and macro. And as Bruce just mentioned, Russell Klimas is going to be the judge that night. So be sure, and if you're able to make the meeting on August 21st, again, where he's going to be demonstrating and going through light painting, be sure and take good notes, because that will come in handy for that October competition, with light painting and macro being the 2 themes for that one. Just wanted to, again, a couple of the highlights for Cheryl. It would take all night if we went through all of her accomplishments in that, but wanted to just kind of bring up a few of the things that she's done. A nationally acclaimed nature photographer, traveled to every continent in the world, capturing amazing images of nature, wildlife, and indigenous cultures. Her photographs have been widely published, appearing in print, on web, television, and in solo and group exhibits. Her list of clients and credits include the American Humane Association, Overseas Adventure Travel, the Denver Post, National Geographic Society, Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. And again, that's a lot of other ones, but those are just several of the notable places that they've been on display. Cheryl's aesthetic compositions, artistic use of light, exquisite detail have been honored with several prestigious awards from organizations including Earth Day Network, Nature's Best Photography, the International Photography Awards, and the National Wildlife Federation. She was also featured in a leading female nature photographer by Outdoor Photographer magazine and has appeared in on-camera interviews by 9 News of Denver. Side note, she is also one of the featured speakers at this year's Professional Photographers of Colorado conference, and that's in early November. So with that, I also wanted to open, I know that she has a upcoming workshop just in a couple of weeks in Africa, and that one, fortunately or unfortunately, is sold out, so we don't have the opportunity to join that one. But she has a lot of other great workshops that are going to be coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and, if you want to kind of bring attention to those.
No, I can just talk briefly about it. So I usually go to Africa, a scheduled trip in September of every year, just so everybody knows about that. Right now I'm going to Tanzania, Africa. I have a really excellent guide there. So it's a beautiful place, and I'm looking at some other places in Africa as well, but that's a great trip. My next big trip, sometimes I do Basque in the fall, so I never know. If I have demand, a lot of times I'll put together a last minute trip. Those are easy to do. But my next scheduled trip after that are the monarchs in Mexico, which is really a wonderful opportunity. And if you're interested at all in those, I would suggest considering that sooner rather than later, because the climate is changing and the patterns are changing. And right now I have access to a reserve where we can stay with the butterflies for hours. And a lot of the reserves limit you to 20 minutes, and it's just not enough time to do photography. So we hike up and then we just sit there, all day, have our lunch, take pictures. The butterflies are not real active until, it warms up and the sun comes out. So we don't have to hike up super early. It's just an amazing experience. You do have to be able to hike a little bit, but we go very slowly. I'm a slow hiker myself, so I don't like to go fast. And we have porters. So don't be too concerned. If you can just plug along slowly, we'll get you up there. So that's wonderful. Of course, I always do the cranes in Nebraska in March, prairie chickens in April. I've got a Costa Rica trip that's not on my website yet for May. I have a client who's actually interested in going to Tanzania in June. So if anybody's interested, reach out to me, because if I can get enough people for that one, we'll put it together and go. I'll go to Africa, just kind of scheduled in September. Iceland is another trip I'm working on for the summer. And then I've got a great itinerary, which I will be getting up on the website soon, for Australia. So when I graduated from school, I spent 3 months in Australia. It's a wonderful place. So we're going to some of my favorite places there. So that's going to be a really nice itinerary for the end of 2025. And then Patagonia, I'm looking at in the future. And so lots of destinations. And there is a form on my website. So if you have suggestions or places you want to go, let me know. And if you can get a group of people from the club together, I can customize too. I like to do small group trips because I just think it's a better experience. You're not getting in the way of each other. So I prefer to do small groups, 4 to 8 people tops. Usually I land somewhere in the 6-person range, but feel free to reach out. And then I will say also, because I do travel, if you email me or call me, it's a good idea to leave different messages, because I might be traveling somewhere where I have phone but no email, or I might be traveling somewhere where I have email but no phone. And if I don't get back to you right away, for some reason I didn't get the message. So if you leave multiple messages, I will eventually get back to you when I, have access to whatever service I can get, wherever I am. So please, just be persistent, because I always get back to people. It's just sometimes I don't get the message, or I'm somewhere where, I have to get back to civilization. So, and if you have any questions, feel free to call or email. I like phone calls. Phone calls are good.
Well, thank you. And I think of all of those places that you mentioned, there's like at least 4 of those are on my bucket list. So I will, I plan on doing one of those here sometime soon. So,
Wonderful.
but thank you. I don't know if there are any other questions about upcoming events.
Meetings in September, October, only virtual.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Good point.
I haven't heard from the city differently, but yeah, they're supposed to renovate this building September, October, so they should all be Zoom unless something changes.
And that begins with the next meeting then?
Yeah, our
first
last
September?
meeting in
Okay.
August should be the last one here.
Okay, got it. But so the one with Russell is in person, and then the other ones would be
Right, and Russell will be in
After that.
person, everything else will be Zoom,
for the next.
and then
couple
we
months.
should
Okay.
hopefully be back in November.
Okay, great. Good question. Okay. Then with that, I'll turn it over to Jane first, and also a big thank you to Jane for all of the work that he once again has done to coordinate all of the images and gather them and categorize them. I've been in her shoes before, and it's a lot of work that she's done over these last few days since they've been submitted. So thank you, Jane, for the.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, the first one we're looking at beginner, intermediate, colored. This one is called Beak Dive.
All right. Great. Well, obviously you captured about the perfect moment. So you did really well on your timing. It looks like your highlights are a little bit close to blowing out. So I'd just be a little more careful on your exposure. And then compositionally, we're kind of diving out of the frame. So this could be corrected really easily with cropping. We don't need, think about what is my subject, and is anything else in the frame, it's got to be supporting the subject, or we should get rid of it. So all of the information to the left is really not helping tell a story about our subject. So I would have just cropped in tighter to this, and that would have brought the score up quite a bit. So I'm going to give it a 7. But great timing, great timing.
Blue mating dance. Booby.
Booby. You can say booby.
Yes,
Right.
yeah, I know. That's right. Lots of fun animal names, aren't there? Yes. Okay. So again, I think the lighting on this is just really lovely. It's nice, soft light. You really caught a very nice moment and pose. So, the things that are distracting in the image are, kind of the rocks here. So if you can move your position, and I know sometimes the action happens fast and it's difficult to do that, but again, we really want to watch our backgrounds so that we try and get clean backgrounds as much as possible, which helps take the eye of the viewer to the subject, and they don't get distracted in the background. But it's nice and sharp, and the lighting's lovely, and the pose is great. So I'm going to give that an 8.
Cheers.
So these kind of images are really difficult. I haven't done product work in quite a while, but glass is always one of the most challenging things to do. So, I think compositionally it's nice. I like the tilt of the glasses, although that's working really well. But, whenever you have liquid in glasses, it's really nice if you can see kind of the color of the liquid. So a lot of times what you need to do is hide a little white card behind the liquid, so that it has something to bounce. The light can bounce to the card, and it'll really just bring out the liquid of the glass. So, I think that it could use some work. It also doesn't look really very sharp on the screen. So, I think, again, just go back and practice and do it again. And I think you could get something that's really nice. But I'm going to give that one a 6.
Do you see me?
So again, nice, very nice, warm light. on this bird. Compositionally, you did a really good job of using the rule of thirds and picking a good location for it. It is busy, but I think I think it works just fine because, it's sitting in the bush. There's no way, you're going to separate that anymore. And it does bring your eye into to the subject, and it looks sharp. So I'm going to go ahead and give that an 8.
Hippo house decoration.
So, this is, a very colorful, nice image. I love the blue of the water contrasting with the yellow. That's a great color combination. In terms of your composition, it's really, great up here. We have probably too much water in the front. So when you're looking at an image like this, because it's just nice and clean, the water's smooth, it's beautifully done. It looks like you have, good detail in your whites. But when you have something like this, just think about it again, a different crop. Go to a panoramic type of image. We don't always have to fit a 2:3 ratio. So that's what I would do with that. And I'll give it a 9.
I've got this.
Great expression again. And great capturing of the moment. You chose a fast shutter speed to freeze the action. So all of that's working really, really well. And again, your composition's really good. So, the only thing, it does look like the background is a little bit, I don't know, it looks like you did something in Photoshop to the background. It doesn't look like it's natural. So that could use a little bit more work. It is tricky when you have backgrounds like this, but it does look like there's some artifacts in the processing part of it. So I'll give it a 9. You could use, in a situation like this, using a longer lens would also help, because that's going to give you a more blurred out background. So lower angles with longer lenses are just going to clean up your backgrounds more. So, a lot of times, even though I can be close to a subject like a dog, I will choose to shoot with a longer focal length just to improve my backgrounds.
Land iguana.
So the light is really nice on this. Again, I like how it's sort of just hitting the face of the iguana, and everything else is dark. It is a busier background, but having it darkened down helps a lot. It brings your attention to the face of the subject, which is where we want to go. It'd be nice if we could see that eye a little bit better, and it doesn't look completely sharp on the screen. So I'm going to give that one a 7, but some really nice lighting qualities there.
Leaning into it.
In this image, again, you don't have a lot of control over the time of day. It would be nice to have a little bit better lighting situation, but you can't, you have to take these sorts of pictures when they're available. Good use of shutter speed. You froze the action. I like all of that. Diagonals always work really well in photography. So the leaning really helps. It would be nice, I think, to have a little bit more space in the front. We always want to give whatever's moving plenty of space in the front, and that would have maybe given you a little more room on the bottom as well. So I would have opened that up just a little bit. But I'll give that an 8.
Morning moonset.
So, I like the way that you're using the land formations to kind of point toward the rock that's out in the middle. I think that works really well. It does, the moon does look a little bit pasted in, so we just need to work on our photoshopping a little bit. I'm assuming you allow pretty much anything. Yeah. So, again, and it is really tricky, when you're using Photoshop to do things, and most people probably aren't going to notice it as much, but when I look at it on the screen here, it does look a little pasted in. So the lighting is really nice in the back, but again, I think it's a little bit contrasting the water. So, reprocess and practice again with the Photoshop, and I think that'll help. And I'm going to give that one a 7.
Morning stretches.
So I like the kind of subtle colors of this. I think it's really nice. You've got just a few starfish that are adding just a touch of color, but I like the tones, even though it might not look completely natural in terms of color. I think it's an interesting kind of mood. So it's sort of artistic. So that I like a lot. Again, this is a situation where, what's my subject? Well, it's really this kind of rock formation with the starfish on it. And so this rock that's in the background in the top left, it is really distracting to me. And again, that could have been easily solved by just taking a few steps to the left so that you have a cleaner background over here. So, just really thinking about looking, again, identify the subject, looked at the rest of the scene to see if there's anything that's going to pull your eye away from that subject. So I'll give that a 7. But it looks nice and sharp too.
Route 66 throwback nights.
So this is just a really, nice, clean image. There's good detail in all of the lights, which is important. It looks sharp. It's a nice composition. The only thing I probably would have done to make this stronger would have been to do kind of a dusk dark. So instead of waiting until it's completely dark out, I think if you had just still a little bit of light in the sky, it just makes those yellows of the lights pop against the kind of darker blue of the sky. So I would consider, going back and doing this right at dusk when you still have a little bit of light in the sky. I'll give that an 8.
Santeria de Chimal.
Chamayo.
So, nice use of framing with the trees. I think that's handled really well. This is another situation where, the lighting is just a little bit harsh. Again, going back, either depending on where things are positioned, either for earlier light or later light, I think would help a lot, because we're getting kind of these harsh shadows, and I think that would be nice. Also, I think the composition works well here, but I do try to avoid things that kind of block my view for looking into the scene. So, I would go back and play with a few different angles and see, we've got just this shadow in the front. And again, lighting would help that a lot. If it were a different time of day and we had nice detail in here, that would brighten it up and kind of help lead you through the scene. So I'll give that, but it's nice and sharp. I'll give it a 7.
Scoot over.
So these are, of course, really cute little bee eaters. It is not completely sharp on the screen, just so you know. I like the kind of soft lighting. I think that's really beautiful. Definitely you need to work on sharpness. And again, it's tricky when you've got a bunch of birds together. You really have to think about stopping down a little bit more so you can get the depth of field you need, because you are magnifying quite a bit when you have smaller birds. And then it's a busy background as well. So, that's hard to control also sometimes. Sometimes you just don't have a lot of control over it. You can maybe go into Photoshop and fix it afterwards. It does, again, help a lot that it's darker in the back, but I probably also would have just cropped out the brighter parts of the background, because we don't need, or taken them out in Photoshop. You could take, the lines out that are bright, or just crop tighter in, and that would help a lot. So I'm going to give that one a 6, just for the technical issues, but there's a lot of really positive things going on there. So all just to hopefully help you when you're back in the field, think about all of the different things you can do to improve things.
Send in the clouds.
Send in the clouds. So architectural, actually I did architectural photography for quite a while after I graduated from college. So that's kind of where I started. And I love the reflections of the clouds in the building. I mean, that's working really, really well. We do have a bit of a tilt on our building. So again, now that we've got Photoshop, and, we used to have to use view cameras or perspective control lenses to make sure our lines were straight. But now if you don't get it straight in camera, you can do it in Photoshop. So really, bring your guides over when you're in Photoshop and make sure that your lines are straight, so your building doesn't look like it's leaning over. And it looks like there's some sort of texture in the sky that might be creative. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I like it. So, there's a lot of nice things going on in this image. I'll give it an 8.
Sunset over the 11th green.
In this image, obviously in the title, you put sunset. You were thinking of the sunset, I think, as the subject. But, I think, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think that really the waterfall here is so nice. I probably would have, because the reflection, the water is, it's got a lot of, I don't know if that's foam on the surface, but it's got a lot of white spots on the surface that really, it's not doing a lot for us. So if you can see, if you just cropped up and maybe zoomed in a little bit more, you could get the nicest clouds in the sky, maybe show a little more of the sky and get the waterfall with the clouds just in the sky. And I think that would have been a much stronger composition. I mean, it looks sharp. You could open up the shadows a little bit more in your processing in Photoshop, but there's a lot of potential here. But again, really think about, what do you want the viewer to see? And to me, I would like to see more of the waterfall, make that my subject, and have the sunset sort of accent and support the waterfall. So, that's what I would do with it. I'm going to get that a 7.
Here's Ibis.
I love doing kind of slow shutter speed work. I think it works really well. And you really did a pretty good job of tracking. I mean, the beaks are really sharp. You probably were following the middle bird because that's the sharpest beak. And this one was just moving. The one on the right was moving at a different speed, which is why it's got some blur in it. So, I like the creative blur effect. I think it's a little overpowering with such a white sky. And again, that's not something you can control, but I think it was a good choice to slow down your shutter speed for this. But, I'd like to probably see you, if you're going to try and go really high key, maybe open up the shadows quite a bit on the bird so that the whole thing is very high key and it just has a much more soft feel. Because when you have the really dark shadows with the contrast, I don't think it's quite as effective. So I'll give that a 7. But your panning technique is good. This is a great way to test your panning technique because you can tell right away if you're panning well when you do slow shutter speed work. I'm going to go with that one. It's just such a nice contrast to the color, and the water's so smooth, and the only thing is cropping. So that one.
Brown bear breakfast.
All right. So again, I mean, I like when subjects are in motion, and especially when you don't have a lot of light, going for a slower shutter speed can be a really effective way to communicate the motion of the subject. The cropping is good. I love how the fish is just coming out of the water. I mean, you caught a perfect moment. I'd like to see the eye a little bit sharper. Again, on the screen, it looks much sharper than it does when I look on the monitor here. So I'd like to see the eye a little bit sharper, but it's still, you still get the sense of motion. And so I really do like the image. One tip I will give you is if you're doing these kind of images and you do have a situation where your eye is not quite as sharp, sometimes I'll go through multiple images. And if I have a sharper eye in one of the other images, I'll take that into Photoshop and replace it. So, and it works really, really well. You can just kind of paint it in. So I would consider that if you have more frames, see if you have one where the eye's just a little more defined, but otherwise I really like it. I'm going to give it an 8.
Center point.
Water's always fun to photograph. And I think choosing a slower shutter speed again works really well. You get, that nice smooth sensation of the water flowing. So all of those choices are really good. This is a tricky kind of situation because it is kind of busy rocks and again, where do I want the eye to go? And I think I would have just, what's really most interesting to me about this image is what's happening just, kind of right here in the center. So I get distracted, I get pulled with all these rocks around it. So I think I would have just cropped it in tighter because, some of what's going on here is much more interesting. Then we don't need all of these rocks around it. If we cropped in really tight and just kind of got the flow of the water here, maybe even a square, squares are a great crop too. So I would consider doing that. I'll give this a 7.
Dark and moody.
Just looking, I'm not, sometimes I'm just looking at the screen just to, so I can get a sense of the sharpness, but you know, using strong foreground objects like this in landscapes work really well, especially when, you know, if you didn't have these flowers in the front, you really wouldn't have a very interesting picture. So I think that's working really well. I might have tried to, if you could have, and again, I don't know where you were photographing from, I might have tried to get a slightly higher angle so I got a little more separation behind these front flowers. But I love the lighting of it, the soft lighting. It draws you back. You have a nice curve into the image in the clouds. So all of that's really working well together. So I'll give this, and it's nice and sharp. I'll give it a 9.
Family refreshment.
So the elephants are always fun to photograph. They're such interesting creatures. So this is a really nice family group. Again, I like the use of 3 animals. You know, think photography works really well with odd numbers. So I think the grouping is really nice. And, you know, I also recognize it's really tough when you're photographing, you know, animals in Africa. You don't have a lot of control over positioning sometimes, but I do try and look for, you know, again, backgrounds where I don't have a line kind of coming across. So from a focusing standpoint, this was really the best position because you've got nice parallel lines. So you're going to get all 3 elephants nice and sharp. They're on the same plane. So that's working really well. I would have liked to have, if you could have, and sometimes you can go to a lower window or go up higher. I would have liked to avoid having this kind of merger of the background with the sky and the vegetation. So sometimes when I have a situation like this, I'll pop up and shoot higher so that the tree line would go above the elephant and not through the elephant. Does that make sense? The light looks nice and I like the grouping. I'll give that a 9.
Flowers and mountain.
For this particular image, again, you know, I think we have to really think about what is the subject? Because you know, maybe it's the flowers, maybe it's the mountains, but I don't get a real clear sense of what the subject is. So, and the way the trees are framing it, you know, they're sort of dark. You know, time of day, I think for this image would have, you know, going a little bit earlier or a little bit later or waiting until we had some maybe light on these trees would have been a little bit better. I also think it would help to kind of choose if the subject is the mountains, I think it would have helped to choose like one of the peaks and put that in the center. I mean, I do think the trees kind of draw you in, but having the 2 mountain peaks separated, it kind of makes your eye bounce back and forth. So it's nice and sharp. So I think just considering some of those other factors would help improve it. So I'll give that a 7.
Launch into the light.
So great wing position on this. And this one doesn't show up on the screen as well as it does when you look at the monitor. So it looks like it's blending in a little bit more than it does. So, you know, great timing on your capture. That worked really well. It does look like you have detail in the highlights, and that gets really tricky with this where you've got such dark areas too. So I like that. It is a very busy situation. Now, again, it helps that the background's darker to help separate it, but I probably would have continued to follow this bird. And, you know, maybe if it got over here to the left where you get away from all the busy vegetation, you might have had a nice clean shot with a dark background. And I think that would have been much more powerful. So, and it looks pretty sharp. So, you know, I'll give that a 7. But again, I go back through your slides and see if you have one a little bit later that has a nicer background.
Mountain sunset.
So the colors in the sky here are really nice. And on the screen, the blue looks a little overdone, but when you look at it on the monitor, it doesn't. It looks really, really natural. Although I think you could set your black point a little bit better in this. I think that there's not quite enough contrast in the foreground. So I'd go back in your processing and do that because it does look a little bit toned down. But the color in the sky is nice. And I would say that's probably what you would consider your subject, or the colors in the sky. And the landscape, you know, fits fairly well. It's not an incredibly dramatic scene in terms of the mountains, but the color in the sky is nice. So I'll give that an 8. And the exposure's good.
Mystic forest.
So I like the soft feel of this. It's great to have the path as a leading line back into the trees. I think all of that's working really nicely. When I look in the monitor again, I have kind of better detail in the trees that are on the left. So that's working really well. And it looks pretty sharp. So I'm going to give that one a 9.
Precision Sandhill tea.
So on this one, again, I like compositionally, obviously, how you left room in the front of the cranes. That works really well. It's nice how they're separated against the sky, so they're not merging into the hills behind. So that timing is good. Whenever I have though birds or animals that are on the ground, I would, if it's possible, I would like to kind of see where their feet are. So I would have maybe tried to show a little bit more of the foreground to give the sandhill cranes that are standing on the ground a better base. They're just sort of cropped in an odd position. And even though that's not your primary subject, you want to have a nice base. It does look like you have some haloing. So whatever you did in Photoshop, you need to go back and look at again, because there's definitely, you can see on all the wings, there's haloing. So that, that's not making it look as good as it could. So again, a lot of these things, if you just go back and reprocess and practice that, it'll improve them quite a bit, but I'm going to give that one a 6.
Ray of light.
So great cloud formations. Clouds are always really, really fun to photograph, and what a perfect little spot for the rainbow. So, this is really nicely done. I think the having the building there, the white building against the darker gray with the rainbow, it contrasts really nicely. It looks very sharp. I think this is a very strong image. I'm going to give it a 10.
Stairway.
The line, and I do really like abstract images, and I think the lines of the stairs and the patterns in the glass and the colors are a nice abstract. I find in this image, though, I think the people actually are kind of distracting to me. I would have preferred to just see it as an abstract with the lines. So I would have waited until the people were gone, I think, to do this. Nice, you do have some diagonal, lines leading in. So, but really think about, I might have also just come in and just concentrated on just like a little section, like just the lower section where I get the lines and the diagonal and the blues and reds and purple, and maybe just forego the top part of it. So again, this is a situation where you can go back, probably, hopefully, and try it again, and just look for little vignettes and patterns. You don't always need to show so much of a scene to make it effective, but I'm going to give it a 6.
The eyes have it.
So this is really nicely cropped, really nicely composed. It looks pretty sharp. Sometimes it's hard on the little monitors to see if it's totally tack sharp, but on the screen it looks just perfectly tack sharp. So, great wing position, fast shutter speed. In this image, it doesn't bother me so much that the sky is white. I think it's contrasting nicely. You did a great job on the processing with your contrast. It's really lovely. And again, the crop is appropriate. You didn't need to go 2x3, having a little more of a panoramic style, or a little longer rectangle works really well. So I'm going to give that a 10 also.
Tiny dancer.
Hummingbirds are always fun to photograph. So with this particular image, I mean, obviously you have a really nice situation here with the hummingbird, going down to feed on the flowers. And, I like the positioning of the head and how you can see the beak so clearly. It does bother me a little bit to have this flower in front. And again, I know, it's difficult to just get yourself in the perfect position when these things are happening, but I might have moved around a little bit. If it was coming back to this spot over and over again, I might have moved around to see if I could maybe get this front flower not to merge with the hummingbird. I would look for cleaner backgrounds too, where you don't have so much color contrast in the background. Because the reds do kind of pull my eye away. I'd rather see kind of like the greens and the yellows if you can separate them more. And a lot of times with hummingbirds, if you can take a, green card or something out with you and place it behind the flower, you can get a perfectly clean background. So, there's nothing wrong if you're in a situation where you're working with a scene that you can put some props and things up. You can really kind of control your backgrounds that way. But it is nice and blurred out. It's just that, again, it kind of pulls my eye. Any color is going to pull your eye away from the subject. So, and it's not quite as sharp as I'd like to see it. So on this one, I'm going to give it a 6.
Under the lights.
Compositionally, this is pretty good, except that I think you have a little more foreground than you need. Again, you want to have a good base. You don't want to cut it too tight to the building. But I think what's really interesting and what we want to focus on are the northern lights in the sky. So I would have sacrificed a little bit of the foreground to give myself a little bit more of the sky. Also, the sky looks a little, I think, brighter than it needs to be naturally. I mean, I think I would increase the contrast in the sky and darken it down a little bit because, it was nighttime. And the sky is just a little bit brighter. So, we could lose a little bit of light on the building too. We're not trying to say this was taken in daylight. So I think I would work with those things, but it looks really sharp. And I think if you just made some processing adjustments, that would really make it pop and make those colors pop more. If it was darker, they're going to just pop out. So I think if you make those changes, it'll increase the impact of it quite a bit. So I'm going to give that an 8.
Water drop lampshade.
So these are always fun. We had to, I was an industrial scientific major in school, so we had to do these water droplets where we froze them, and they're always a lot of fun. And you never know what you're going to get. It's great. All the shapes are wonderful. And you caught a really interesting shape here. I like that. I like the color choices you made. So I think all of that's working really well. What I don't like about it, again, I'm really sensitive to backgrounds and horizontal lines. This darker blue line that's going especially through the center of it, that really to me takes away from this wonderful shape you have. And again, where we can use Photoshop, it would take a little bit of work, but you could go in and just kind of clean up this line, take that line out so that you have the nice shape. I don't think the lines that are down at the bottom are as distracting, but we want the eye to kind of go up to kind of this mushroom type shape. So I think if you just worked on the background, that would help a lot with making the image stronger overall. So I'll give that an 8.
We are here for your flea problem.
That's a great title. And titles are important too. So I really like that. That's very creative. The soft light works really well for this image. We can see really good fur detail and nice bird detail. It separates well from, it is a somewhat busy background, but it does separate well. I might have gone into Photoshop and taken out all of these dark spots on the top. Again, this is a situation where if you could use a longer focal length, you're going to naturally kind of just get a better background. So really think, with wildlife, I really do. I recommend people use kind of the longest focal length they can to really improve the backgrounds, even if you're able to get close to the wildlife. You get a narrower angle of view, and it's easier to blur out the background. So, think about that. But, it doesn't bother me a lot that the birds are merging into the face. I think it's helpful that they're all looking in the same direction. So, and you did a good job on your depth of field. So you got, everything sharp along the way. And again, sometimes when you're doing that, especially if you're shooting with a longer focal length, you will, in order to get a nicer background, you'll have to go into Photoshop and blur the background in Photoshop, because if you need more depth of field for your subject and your, the birds from all the way back to the antlers, you would pull the background in more than you want to. And that's where I will choose the best aperture that I need to get the depth of field I want. And then I'll go into Photoshop and work on my background there. So I think, all of these tools that we have are just wonderful nowadays. When we were shooting with film, we didn't have all of those options. So you can really get what you envision in your mind. So I'd go back and play with this some more in terms of that, but I'll give it a 8.
Hold on a
3?
sec. Just a second.
The
Two
third
thousand.
one up there, I think was a 9.
Yeah,
I think was it the
I
two,
think
I think the first two.
First two.
And, this one is not. It's this one,
Right, the first one and the third one.
this one, and the third one.
I think it was the first and the second. I think the third one was a
Yeah.
9, maybe. Oh, the L9s.
Third one was 9 and the
Whoops,
fourth
and,
one was
oh,
9.
Okay.
The fifth one is 9, but we have 2 10s, right?
There were 2 10s.
Yep,
wait,
Ray of
it doesn't
light.
have it.
and the eyes have it.
The eyes have it.
Those are the 2 10s.
No, excuse me.
I'm gonna go with the rainbow and the clouds.
Ray of light.
Yeah, ray of light. Yeah, it's just really nicely composed and
Number 10.
dramatic and
Plain devotion.
the lighting on this, again, really, really nice, even lighting. Cloudy days are great for portraits because we don't get those harsh shadows. So I think that's handled well. I like the expression on her face. I think it's appropriate for kind of the situation she's in. The places I think where this image could be improved, again, are compositionally, because again, this is our subject. Her face is really our subject. And so all of this extra space we have behind her is not helping lead us to her face. So I probably would have even cropped it into the black part of the carriage and just made sure I cut out all of this grass in the background. And then you just have kind of something that surrounds her in black and draws you right into her face. Because again, your eye is always going to go to the lightest part of the image. So her face and her are very light. So, consider doing that. I mean, otherwise her hand placement in the front is nice. It is a little, I think, distracting to have the hands, I think their hands behind her. So I probably, if you have control over it, if she's just passing by and it's just catch as you can, you could take this out in Photoshop, which I probably would do. But otherwise, I think, the angles are really nice. So I'll give it a 9.
Warm glow.
So again, architectural photography is always a lot of fun, and you did a really good job on straight lines here. They look really well lined up. So all of that was technically handled very well. I like all of the leading lines, the diagonals coming down. I think that's nice. I might have left just a little more room on the left to just give a little more space for the stairway, but it's not bad. It's abstract. In terms of processing, you've got good shadow. You do have good shadow detail in here, but I might just play with the processing again. Just play with the contrast a little bit and see if you can get just a little bit more pop. I might bring the shadows up, bring the highlights down a little bit, but just try and get a little more contrast, which I think would bring out some of the texture that you have in the walls. It looks better on the screen than it does on the monitor. But I really like it overall, so I'm going to give it a 10 because I do think there are only 2 images in this category, and I think it's stronger than the other one.
Are we jumping?
All right, zebras. I think there's a little bit of motion. Again, it always looks sharper on the screen than it does on the monitor, but there's a little bit of motion in the feet, and I think that works well. I mean, the shutter speed was fast enough to stop the heads and the eyes, which is the most important thing. So I think that's good. I like the water splashing up. I think that gives it a good sense of where they are. The background is really, really busy and really contrasty. So, I think that overall just takes your eye away from the zebras. You already have, the stripe patterns, and then it just kind of gets confused in the background. So, this is a situation, again, where you often can't control where you are. So you either have to try and go into Photoshop and make the background less distracting, which would be really difficult to do with all the water splashing around. So this is a situation where I would probably wait and see if the zebras ran into an area where I have a cleaner background, where I'm not going to have a separation issue. So, sometimes you just have to wait and follow animals until they get into a better situation if you cannot move your positioning. So I'm going to give that a 7.
Beach bouquet.
So I like the composition of this. It's a great piece of driftwood. It's got a really nice texture. I like the way that you use the starburst behind it, and the 3 little birds up at the top are wonderful. I think that's really nice to have. You are blowing out your highlights though. So again, you may be able to go back and reprocess this and see if you do have any detail in this area. But I think anytime you have something that's that bright, you really do need to make sure you have at least some detail in it. You're not going to get detail in the brightest part of your starburst, but in the water, I think you could. And so, I don't know if you did this HDR. I mean, this is obviously the perfect, well, you probably didn't because you got the birds, although you could paste those back in. So a lot of times, I'll do things like I'll run an HDR and then I'll, Photoshop the birds and things back in. So, think about all the different techniques you can use to get the look that you want, but it does have some technical issues. So I'm going to give it a 7.
Cloud Ridge.
So I like the creative use of the positioning of the cloud. It's a very interesting sculpture, and I think that was creative. And again, you really had to be thinking about your composition and what you wanted to do with it and placing it that way. I do think, again, though, it would have been, we were crowded up here. So if we're really trying to direct the viewer to, and I think that's what you were intending to do, is direct the viewer up to the hand that's holding the cloud. I think we need to make that more prominent in our composition. So we don't need so much space on the right. We really need to just shift our negative space over to the left. And I think that would have helped a lot. Now your light is kind of coming from behind and creating this contrast, but I think that works. The light itself kind of like leads you up the hand to where the cloud is. The cloud is probably a little bit brighter than it needs to be, at least, when I'm looking at on the screen. So you might just tone down the cloud a little bit, do a little burning there. But I'll give it a 7. It looks nice and sharp.
Downhill.
So great diagonal. It's really nice anytime you can have diagonal lines. So I think that's working well. The lighting is contrasty and harsh. Again, I'd like to see this at a different time of day when you're not getting such a harsh contrast from the hat over his face. It'd be nice if you could see the face of the cowboy who's riding the horse. But it looks sharp, and it's a little hard to tell if we still have detail on the hat. The hat might be a little blown out. But again, I'd go out at a different time of day and try and just get better lighting on the situation, but to keep those angles, and it would be a lot better. I'm going to give that one a 6.
How about a swim?
So I think going in really close to an image like this is great. You can see the texture, the eye is sharp, the teeth look sharp. So all of that's really nicely handled. The background is, blurred out and muted. So there's nothing that's really going to distract me in the background. I probably would have maybe cropped in a little bit more on the bottom, just because I don't know if we really need kind of the shadow that's hitting the bottom of the chin area. So I might have just cropped in a little bit tighter there, but it's really, the contrast is nice. I like it. I'm going to give it a 9.
It's electric.
So this is sort of an abstract image again, which is nice. It's a nice patterning. I think that works well. It's a great image for black and white. I think it helps all of the words and things pop out and nothing's really competing with each other from a color standpoint. So I like the fact that you chose to do this in black and white. Maybe have a little bit of, again, it's hard to tell completely on the screen, but I might have just done a little quick burn in this middle section on the top, just so it doesn't blow out. But overall, I like it. It's sharp across the entire plane, which is great. So I'll give it a 9.
Me and my shadow.
So this is a great technique as well when you have, 2 animals and that there's no way you're going to get them both in focus. I think it's really good that you chose to make the back, obviously out of focus, because if you pull it too much into focus, then it just looks like you missed the depth of field. So I think if you're going to do something like this, making it obviously out of focus really helps. Now, compositionally, again, we're crowding in the back. So I think, we don't need the space that we have on the left. So I would have just taken the extra space I have on the left, and I would have just moved it over to the right, and that would have helped. But otherwise, I think the composition is nice. The lighting, again, I'd like to see it a little more to the front. The background is a little bit on the busy side and contrasty. So sometimes what I'll do in a situation like this is I'll actually go in and I'll process, for the wildlife itself, and then I'll process separately for the background and make it less contrasty. So I want the contrast in my wildlife, but I don't necessarily want the contrast in my background. And then I'll just paint in the background. So, think about things like that. I think that would help a lot. But I'll give it a 7.
No more room.
So this is a really nice, clean image that really tells a story about the birds. I like it in black and white. I think it works really well in black and white. The depth of field, you do have the birds sharp. I probably would have increased my depth of field a little bit here too, because you probably can't see it as well on the screen, but the very front of the nest is out of focus. And I would like to see, because there's such nice texture in that, I would like to see depth of field go all the way through the image. And I don't think it would hurt to pull the wood into focus a little bit more, because again, your eye is going to go to the birds, I think, no matter what. I probably would have cropped, again, I think we have more space on the top than we need. And I would rather see that space move to the bottom so that we can see the bottom of the nest itself. So just thinking of, in terms of, again, I mean, we know the birds are the subject, and so, you are focusing in on those, but we also want to show the environment. And I think it would have helped to balance the image out if you had a little bit of wood on the bottom and a little bit of wood on the top and showed the entire nest. But I'm still going to give it a 9. I think it's really cute the way the birds are laid out, and it's clean.
Retired.
In this image, farm equipment's always fun to photograph. I think it's really nice to have the lighter machine contrasted against the black. Again, it's always nice if your subject is the lightest part of the image, because that's where your eye is going to go. I like that you use kind of a diagonal, approach. So I don't know what the machine does, but I think that's, I think it's nice. I mean, the tires have character. You can see that they're flat and it works well. You've got good texture, good detail, nice contrast. All of that was handled really well. I don't know that it's a really exciting subject, and I might have approached this a little bit differently if I were doing it, and just try to, there's so many interesting patterns and parts on this. I think I would have just, instead of trying to get the whole thing, I would suggest going back and just doing little patterns and textures. Like, I mean, there's so many things, the tire textures, the front panel textures, the side, there are all these interesting shapes, in the body of it. So, it's a nicely executed image. I just think you could have had something really interesting as an abstract. So, I'll give it an 8.
Riding the rocks.
Riding the rocks. So, I'm assuming this is Mount Evans. So, you know, again, I think this works really well in black and white, and especially because we've got the dark backgrounds of the mountains. However, I think having the sections with all the snow is distracting. So, you know, we want the eye to go to the mountain goat. So I would have either, you know, cloned out all the white, cropped, I might have just cropped in tighter and then cloned out the white specks that are left in the background. And we have more space than we need. If the mountain goat is our subject, we could crop in quite a bit tighter, and that would bring the image score up. I'm going to give it a 9, but I would have absolutely given it a 10 if you just would have cropped tighter and gotten rid of the white in the background.
San Miguel Mission.
You know, nice use of framing on the trees. I think you framed very, very nicely around the crop at the top. I would have liked to have seen this image with the lighting direction differently, though. I think, you know, the front of the building is in shadow. So, but if if you'd run this composition, I think with front lighting, I think we would have better detail in the leaves, and I think it would be just a stronger image overall. So I'm going to give this, but it's nice and sharp. I'm going to give it a 7.
Snacks.
You know, I think the diagonal wing position is working really well in this. Again, you know, it's much nicer to have diagonal lines than straight lines. So that's a really big plus. The contrast is nice between the head and the body and the wings. So all of that's working well. You have more space than you need in the image. So I would have cropped in a bit tighter. The clouds are supported. They're not distracting. I think that all of that's working well, but we could have cropped some of those out. But it's not, you know, I think the lighting could have been quite a bit better. So, you know, I'm gonna give this one a 6. Just different time of day.
Venice Canal Light.
When I look at this image on the screen, it definitely needs a little bit more contrast. So, you know, if you go back and reprocess this, you know, again, make sure when you're doing black and white, if there is a black in the image, you want to make sure you have a true black and you want to have a true white. So, and we do, we have all the tonal values that should be in this image, but when I look at this, at the screen, at the monitor, I don't see a real rich black. So I would go back and do that. You know, it's nice the way you know, you can look down the canal. Again, I'd like though to have more, I think we have too much room at the top and not enough room in the front. We want somewhere for the boat to go. It's okay that it's coming directly at us, but it needs a little bit more space. You know, the lines of the buildings are relatively straight. They could be straightened a little bit more in Photoshop. You know, I'll give it a 7.
How
How
about
about
a
a
swim?
Mhm.
Bison Fair.
This is, you know, compositionally, this is really strong. And I love how you can see the eyes of bisons. It is often difficult when you're photographing bison to see the eyes. So the fact that you were able to capture wide open eyes on this bison is really nice. You can see the white of the eyes. It's not, though, as sharp as I'd like it to be. It looks like the back eye is out of focus. So technically we have some issues here. I like the contrast. It's maybe a little higher contrast than we need. You probably could have toned down the contrast in the body of it, but the nice clean background, all of that's working really well. The most difficult part is it's not sharp technically, so it needs some work there. So I'm going to give it a 7. But if you went back and improved those capture techniques, it would raise way up.
Day at the Park.
Okay, so this is, I love the contrast again of the white against the dark background. That's working really well. Yeah, you left plenty of space in the front. All of that's nice. I think we have more space at the bottom than we need. I might have cropped in and made this more panoramic with a little less space on the bottom. Good for detail. Again, though, I probably would have used a longer lens to just blur the background out a little bit more, but it's a very nice image. I'll give it a 9.
First Light.
I really like this. I think it's just, you know, the light is the subject and it just directs your eye right in. The only thing I might have done is given just a little bit more space on the left, but I still think it's incredibly strong. So I'm going to give it a 10. Light is a great way to lead the viewer.
Flying Debris.
So again, compositionally, this is nice. It's tight in on the subject. It looks sharper. I think you could have toned down the highlights a little bit more. The highlights of the dust coming off are blown out a little bit, so that needs some work. The background's, you know, not, again, I would have liked to have seen it with a little longer focal length lens, but it's not real distracting and the dust kind of softens that. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 9.
Foggy Mountain Morning.
So the mood of this image is just, you know, is really nice. I like the way the fog is mixed in. I probably would have said, go ahead and crop out that little section of sky. I find the little section of sky more distracting than helpful. So I think I would have maybe cropped that out and just come in closer and let the bend of the little stream be more of a subject, maybe give a little more room at the bottom for that. You know, the lighting's a little bit on the harsh side. So I'm going to give this one a 7.
Foliage.
Gets a little bit on the busy side. I mean, I like the patterns. I think the patterns are great, but I think, again, I'd like to see it closer into, you know, maybe just one leaf or a few. I think going across the whole thing, it just starts to look a little bit too busy. And again, from a lighting standpoint, you know, I'd rather see softer light so we don't have such harsh contrast between the shadow areas and the highlights. And you know, one thing you can do when you're out photographing foliage and things like this, take a diffuser along. If you know, if you have a friend that can hold things for you, a lot of times you can diffuse the light, and that'll help a lot in making it something that's more photographable, especially if you're doing it more at midday. So I'm going to give this one a 6.
Just hanging out.
A great dark background. I think, you know, anytime you can have a subject against a dark background, your eye's not going to have anywhere to go except the subject. So that works really well. The side lighting works okay for this. I don't know exactly where you took it, but I think the side lighting works okay. It does look like we're getting a little bit of flare near the eyes, so you might just be able to burn that down a little bit in Photoshop, but it looks sharp. You know, I'm going to give this an 8. It's a little crowded on the right, maybe a little more space there.
Level light.
When you're photographing something like a lighthouse, I think you do really have to think about, again, you know, can we lead the viewer in? And while I like the pools of water, you know, we don't have the line that's coming across with the rocks in front is kind of acting more like a block than something that's guiding us in. Now, you know, it would have been neat if you could get like the reflection in the front pond or something of the lighthouse. I think that would have helped to kind of connect the two, but this feels like almost 2 separate images to me. So it's the depth of field is great. The contrast is great. It's sharp. So there's a lot of technical things that were done really well. I just think the positioning could have been used differently to make it stronger. So I'm going to give it a 7.
On a mission.
I think the expression of these two people is really good. I think it makes a very bold statement. It is very contrasty though. I mean, we're losing all the highlight detail. So you know, again, whenever you have an image, I really like to see a good white with detail, a good black point. It doesn't bother me that we're losing, you know, a lot of detail in the darkest shadows areas because we don't need the detail there, but I think it is important on the skin to have detail. There's also some banding. I don't know what you did in the background, but there is banding that I can see in the kind of gray halo that goes around. So there are a lot of nice things working here, but from a technical standpoint, we really got to tone that down. And maybe you could do it in processing. So I would go back and reprocess this because I do like the way they're looking into each other. I think well, I would crop more square though. You don't need so much space on the right and left. So I'm going to give this a 7.
2 trees.
When you have a situation like this where you have a really bright sky, I think silhouetting trees against it works really well. And what you did well here is, I like the diagonal. I think that works really well. You didn't merge the trees with the mountain to the left, and I think that was appropriate. Although I don't know that I really like the mountain to the left as much. I'd rather see it, I think, maybe out or more pronounced in the left to give some balance. But for the subject that you have, I think you handled it well. It looks sharp. I like silhouettes. I think they work well. This would have been, I think, a really nice shot if you'd have color in the sky too. And a lot of times what I'll do with a situation like this is I'll just take it and then I'll do this as a color image and replace it with a colorful sky. So, I like it. I like things about it, but I think the trees aren't quite interesting enough to make it really strong. So I'm going to give it a 7.
That's for home.
So this is a beautiful location. I like, again, I like, I like the way you've got the curve of the water coming around. If you could have gone to the right a little bit more and get a little more curved, you may not have been able to. I probably would have done that, but it works really well the way it is. I might have slowed down the water a little bit more. You do have blur in the water. If you went back again, I might slow it down. Try different shutter speeds and see what you like. But it's, it's beautifully composed. It's a nice balance of tones. I'm going to give it a 9.
Waiting.
So I think the mood of this image is really nice. I do like it a lot. I think, having the light just falling on her and the lamppost or the light that's hanging from the ceiling off to the right, that creates kind of a nice diagonal itself. I probably would have, instead of cropping into the window or whatever it is kind of above her, I probably would have shown that whole thing and made it just a little bit more vertical. And again, you don't need maybe as much room on the right. So but I think I think it works really well, and I don't know what you had there that might have been a reason you did that. And it's got a great mood to it. So I'm going to give it a 9.
What's your problem?
So great eye contact with the camera. It's nice and sharp. It is busy, in the background a little bit, but it's in the grasses and they're subdued enough that it's not, as distracting. And I think, this would be a difficult image in which to kind of take the background out in Photoshop. So I think you need the grasses there, but the way you handle the lighting is wonderful, works really well. I might have just burned down some of the brighter grasses that are over the body on the right, but it's a nice clean image. I'll give it a 9.
Wild iris twists and turns.
So I like the high key look of this. I think the shapes are great. The high key look is really nice. It doesn't look quite as sharp in some of the places I'd like to have it sharp in the image. So I'm going to give it an 8, but I do like the image.
Windshield web.
So I think, again, a great title, a perfect title for the image. It does look like a web. And I think compositionally, I think you made a good choice there. I might have actually expanded, if you could have, I might have expanded out a little bit more to get kind of the center of the impact a little bit more in the rule of thirds position. So I might have left just a little more negative space around it, but it's sharp. I like the contrast. It looks like you could use maybe a little bit more detail in the highlight areas. So again, I'd reprocess and just maybe tone those highlights down a little bit. It's maybe not quite as sharp at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a 7.
In this category, I have one member vote that we need to break a tie on, and that is
Oh,
between Day at the Park and Vesterhorn.
11, Vesterhorn.
Vesterhorn? Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Pro.
These are our last 2, correct?
Last 2.
Okay, great. I really like the choice of a slower shutter speed with this. I think it's great with the clouds moving. So it's a very creative way to photograph architecture. So we're so used to seeing things with the clouds still. And I think that was a good choice. I might have even, if you could have, and again, you probably needed a neutral density filter to slow it down more, but I might have slowed them down even a little bit more, but I do really like that effect. I think that the building it's leaning a little bit. So, again, you could go into Photoshop, the back, I think the back portion is leaning a little bit in. So I would just go into Photoshop and fix that. I would have liked to have seen, because again, I think, the subject is the ruin itself, but the sky is really interesting with the clouds moving. And I think we have more of a base in the front than we really need. So I would have just cropped a little bit again off the bottom and shown a little bit more of the sky. You know, think about putting your subject in that lower rule of thirds position so that you have a little more sky to balance out the composition. But I like the image. It's sharp. I'll give it a 9.
I've got my eye on you.
And so again, the slow shutter speed works really, really well for this image. The building's sharp, even the boat is sharp, but the water is blurred and the wheel, yeah, whatever you call those things. Like, it's not coming into my mind right now. Yeah, it's nicely done. So I think the criticism here would be, I'd like to see more room at the top. I'd like to see more of the sky. I think we could take a little bit off the water. You don't want to crowd it too much at the bottom, but you know, and maybe you have some more room in the image. So I would just make the crop so that it's a little bit taller. This looks more like maybe an 8x10 crop. So I'd go to more of a 2x3 and just try and get more. And you could, you know, in Photoshop, again, you can expand your canvas and it might do a pretty good job on something like this. So I think we just need a little bit better balance, a little more room at the top. But I'm going to give this one a 10 because I think it's a little bit better than the other one. I just think it's.
Let's see here. And by the way, thank you, Cheryl. Great commentary in that. I was going to say that a couple of things I wrote down here in that as far as the things to think about is the compositions and cropping, special croppings and so forth and that. Lighting, time of day, the importance of that. And then on the black and whites, the importance of contrast and getting that part of it right. But a lot of really good comments that we'll all be thinking about next time we're out in the field. So
Good. I hope
and
that
post processing as well. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see here. I'm going to go through here real quick. So on beginner, intermediate digital color, we have Judges Award. So Judges Award and first place was Carolyn Ryman with Hippo House Decoration. Second place in the member voting was Bruce Ryman with Scoot Over. Third place was also Bruce Ryman with Tis Ibis. And honorable mention was Gary Danis with Route 66 Throwback Nights. Advanced digital color, we have Judges Award was Jeff Woodward with Ray of Light. First place was Peter Rondinone with Dark and Moody. Second place was also Peter Rondinone with Mystic Forest. Third place was Carino Zaragoza with Precision Sandhill Team. And honorable mention was Jane Richards with Family Refreshment. Pro Digital Color, we had Dave Purcell with both of those. The highest scoring was Warm Glow, and second would have been Plain Devotion. Beginner, intermediate, digital, black and white. We have Judges Award was Bruce Ryman, How About a Swim? First place was Carolyn Ryman with Are We Jumping? Second place was Tamara Ripley with No More Room. And third place was Carolyn Ryman with Me and My Shadow. And the honorable mention, which is the same one as the Judges Award, that was Bruce Ryman with How About a Swim? Advanced digital, black and white. We have, let's see, we have Judges Award was Jeff Woodward with First Light. First place was Jane Richards with What's Your Problem? Second place, Peter Rondinone with Vesterhorn. Third place, Carino Zaragoza, Day at the Park. And honorable mention was Susan Longer, On a Mission. Pro Digital Black and White, again, Dave Purcell with both entries over there. Top one was I've Got My Eye on You, and second one was It's All Greek to Me.
Okay, so we'll run through all the images.
This is Carolyn Ryman, Big Dive. Roger Frame, Blue-Footed Booby, Mating Dance. Cheers is Brian James. Gary Hubble, Do You See Me? Carolyn Ryman, Hippo House Decoration. Tamara Ripley, I've got this. Roger Frame, Land Iguana. Tamara Ripley, Leaning Into It. Tony Lazzari, Morning Moonset. Tony Lazzari, Morning Stretches. Gary Danis, Route 66 Throwback Nights. Jeff Scott, and I'm not going to say the name. Bruce Ryman, Scoot Over. Jeff Scott, Send in the Clouds. Gary Hubble, Sunset Over 11th Green. And Bruce Ryman, Tess Ibis. Bruce Norman, Brown Bear Breakfast. Susan Langer, Center Point. Peter Rondine, how do you say your last name? Rondinoni. Okay, Dark and Moody. Jane Richards, Family Refreshment. Michael Rhino, Flowers and Mountain. Jane Richards, Launch into the Light. Michael Rhino, Mountain Sunset. Peter Rondinine, Mystic Forest. Carino Zaragoza, Precision Sandhill Team. Jeff Woodard, Ray of Light. Susan Langer, Stairway. Kathy Sneed, The Eyes Have It. Kathy Sneed, Tiny Dancer. Jeff Woodard, Under the Lights. Bruce Norman, Water Drop Lampshade. Carino Zaragoza, we are here for your flea problem. This is Dave Purcell, Plain Devotion. Dave Purcell, Warm Glow. Okay, Carolyn Ryman, Are We Jumping? Tony Lazzari, Beach Boca. Brian James, Cloud Reach. Tamara Ripley, Downhill. Bruce Ryman, How About a Swim? Jeff Scott, It's Electric. Carolyn Ryman, Me and My Shadow. Tamara Ripley, No More Room. Gary Hubble, Retired. Bruce Ryman, Riding the Rocks. Jeff Scott, San Miguel Mission. Tony Lazzari, Snacks. Gary Danis, Venice Canal Life. Bison Stare by Bruce Norman. Carino Zaragoza, Day at the Park. Jeff Woodard, First Light. Carino Zaragoza, Flying Debris. Kathy Sneed, Foggy Mountain Morning. Michael Rhino, Foliage. Jane Richards, Just Hanging Out. Jeff Woodard, Nubble Light. Susan Langer, On a Mission. Michael Rhino, Two Trees. Peter Rondinine, Vestrahorn. It's Vestrahorn, isn't it? Susan Langer waiting. Jane Richards, what's your problem? Kathy Sneed, Wild Iris Twists and Turns. Bruce Norman, Windshield Web. Dave Purcell, it's all Greek to me. And Dave Purcell, I've got my eye on you.
Awesome images.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks again. That was
You're
really,
welcome.
really great
Well, I hope
commentary.
it's helpful. I try to give some.
Yeah, no, this was constructive and very good. The comments were excellent.
We'll have the recording out in a week.
Okay, thanks. And yeah.